Mark, thank you for joining me today. And I was just wondering if you, just give a bit of an intro to yourself for the listeners.
Yeah, sure. Can do. I'm Mark. I guess we've known each other for quite a while, but for everybody else, I've been in tech for about 25 years. I started out as a physicist and fell into software. Did a bit of control software and then security software. Security took me on to data security and data security took me into finance, and I've been in finance for about 15, 16 years now. So I guess I'm CTO, head of engineering, developer by heart, dad, husband, and I guess an engineering facilitator. Currently, I'm currently doing some fractional work around head of engineering and other bits and bobs. So.
Yeah, I didn't know you started off as a physicist. So,
yeah. I'm a Northumbria University alumni, so not necessarily considered at the time a Russell Group University or anything, but I went from there to the NPL, National Physical Laboratories, and I worked for the government labs in Teddington in London. That was my first trip into London. It was the first time I lived down there. I've been down there quite a few times since, obviously, with finance. But yeah, I was the only person at the time in the lab who knew much about how to get started with a bit of software, and wrote a little bit of software to transmit data from, at the time we were measuring stratospheric methane. It was the start of the we're ruining the environment talk, and stratospheric methane was being measured, so it was a methane instrument.
Oh, nice. So have you always been, were you born in the northeast? Or
I've always come back. I've been all over the place. I've travelled, and I've never really lived elsewhere, but I've been elsewhere full time for a job. London primarily, but I've worked in the US and Canada, and I've worked in the Far East, in Korea and Japan, mostly offshore out there. But yeah, I was born in I was born in Fenham. I wasn't born in Fenham. I was born in the hospital, but I was brought up in Fenham, and then most of the west side of Newcastle. And then as I got older, I've moved a little bit further out now. I live a little bit in Northumberland now, but always been in Newcastle. I love it. I just like the fact that you can have the hustle and bustle if you want. You can get to the beach, you can go up to Kildare, and you got the reservoirs and everything else, and so you can get out in the fresh air.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I've always come back here, and I'm quite passionate about the northeast. I think keep talking about levelling up. I just wish we could. So I'm really quite passionate about that.
Yeah.
So I've always come back here.
Yeah. So you mentioned you went to universities at Northumbria. So did you ever think that you would be in software? Or did you kind of like fall into it?
I didn't know what I wanted to do, if I'm honest. I've always been a very hands-on doer. I've always been rubbish at exams. Sitting in front of an exam paper, even now, colleagues I work with will tell you I'm rubbish at documenting things. Got better, but I've always been more of a doer, and I was always terrible at exams, and I've always been quite a creative person. So I guess it's quite a long time ago now, because I guess I left school in 1995. So when I was making my choices around GCSEs and A-levels, I kind of kept my options open. So I didn't go in all in with the science or all in with the creative. I took art and design and other bits and bobs. And then I guess when I got to A-levels, it was really, really hard then to do what I wanted to do, which was the science, because I hadn't done the foundational stuff, because I'd sacrificed it for the creative stuff. There was a particular teacher who basically had a bit of faith in me and said, if you think you can do it, you can do it. And went from there. But I wanted to go into shipbuilding. I applied to John Moores in Liverpool to go and do marine engineering. I wanted to go into shipbuilding and marine stuff. I've always had a bit passionate about ships and offshore stuff. And then I didn't get in because I didn't do very well in my levels, if I'm honest. And through clearing, I got a place on an applied physics and optoelectronic engineering course at Northumbria, and I guess the rest is history there. I loved it, absolutely loved it, messing with lasers and solar panels and all sorts of other bits and bobs. And then the grounding in physics, it resonated with me. I'm quite an inquisitive person, so I think physics covers everything. It's like how everything works. So it resonated with me. So I never really planned to go into software, but I'd always been involved in computing from an early age. My dad had a ZX81, which was, I don't remember, it was the old plastic keyed thing where you pressed the keys too many times and they broke. And it was so he always had an interest. My dad's an engineer, so he'd always had an interest in electronics and stuff like that. And I think it came from that, I think.
Yeah. And then was software just part of like your job when you were doing like as a physicist,
Yeah.
and then did you just kind of like you said, you're quite inquisitive? Did you just look into it more and more and find it that way?
Yeah, it was more through necessity. I worked in the stratospheric metrology department at National Physical Laboratories in Teddington, with some great scientists. To be fair, it was a real privilege. And we built this. It's a Harriet cell, so it's a way of passing a laser backwards and forwards lots of times in a small space, so it gives you longer length. You can measure. It was stratospheric meteor measurement, but you can measure gases, presence of gases. And this thing goes in a big polystyrene box with a load of electronics, and it gets fastened to a weather balloon, gets sent up at the stratosphere, and then you have like a low frequency radio wave transmission mechanism to get the data back. So once every few days, it'll send a stream of data. And while we receive that to send on a load of electronics, nobody in the lab, we would have to pay quite a lot of money from another department within the lab to get someone to actually process that. I thought, I'm sure I can do this. So I grabbed, at the time, I think it wasn't even a laptop, it was a Pentium 2, I think, or something like that, or a 386 or something like that, one of the old like computers at the time, and cracked away and managed to actually produce something that was reasonably good at just wrangling that data. I mean, by today's standards, it was a tiny amount of data, right? But wrangling that data into something that on the screen that could be looked at by the real scientists in the room, given this was my first job out of university, and they could go, oh yeah, we can see this or we can see that or whatever. And I found it was from there, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I did that for about a year, and then had something on my CV. That's much easier.
Yeah.
And then I went into control systems after that. So it was again data wrangling for a company called they were called Robotic Simulations Limited, and then Flow, a Canadian company. Actually, RSL was formed in the UK, and it was the brainchild of a guy from the UK, and then they got bought by Flow, who were a cutting company based in the States. And that was it's funny how you get new modern buzzwords for things. By today's standards, it would be a digital twin. That's what it was. It was for building digital twins. We didn't call it back then. We just called it a simulation tool. But essentially what you'd do is you'd take a lot of robots and you'd stick them in this virtual world, which was using VRML at the time. Stick them in a virtual world, and then you could then test whether they would work and would get the right angles. I guess someone like Nissan, where they've got a big car production line with lots of robots, taking that line down even for a few minutes is really expensive. So what they'd do is they'd set everything up in this virtual world first and check that the robots weren't going to bump into things, and they could get to the parts and they could get the right angles and everything. And then they'd press a button and the software would then write a program on a floppy disk for all the robots, which means they could take it down, quickly reprogram the robots, and then take it back up again without having to do a simulation. So I worked there, and it just evolved from there. It was very... I guess initially it was very engineering-based software. It wasn't what I'm doing these days, which is financial systems and other bits and bobs. It was all very, it was all based around control systems or something for physical things, real tangible things.
Yeah. Do you think that gave you a good foundation though for how then your career went on? Like, did it give you a good appreciation of what software can do in real world as well as like digital or online?
Yes. I think the simple answer is yes. I think. No matter what you choose as a career or a vocation or a discipline that you want to learn, I always worry that people start too high up the chain. Whereas I think it gave me grounding because basically I'd literally built electronics, and then I'd putting computers together, and then I understood the architecture, I understood what it meant to allocate memory, I understood what it meant when people were talking about processing and how the computer works. And then from how the computer works, how the base languages work, how assembly works, and then some of the higher level languages on top. So when you talk about writing Python now, I could pretty much explain to you how from this Python code you've written on the screen, how that's actually implemented in a processor. And I worry sometimes that people don't have that foundation. I think no matter what you pick, you kind of need a foundation. So in that respect, it set me up for success there really by having the physical engineering piece first, understanding what's going on when I type some code into something, you know.
Yeah, no, I think you've explained that really well. Even to me, like I'm not a techie, but from what you've explained, I can understand why. Then you've got an appreciation for like every like part of like tech, I guess.
It's been fun as well. It's been fun. I get bored easy. I get bored really easy, and doing something different, whether it's writing a different bit of software or just doing something different is really interesting.
Yeah.
And I've done quite a lot of stuff. I guess I had a stint working offshore. That was interesting. With actually what is essentially a great Northeast company as well. I worked for SMD for a little bit, just based up in Newcastle there. And they build like subsea equipment, so free swimming submarines for burying cables and stuff and all sorts of bits and bobs like that.
Yeah.
So that was quite cool.
Yeah.
Go and spend some time on a ship and controlling and writing control systems for essentially for these submarines on the end of umbilical cords.
Yeah.
It was a pretty cool job.
Yeah, good. You've been well travelled then, and you've done quite a lot, which is interesting.
I wish I'd done it in later life, so I could appreciate it, because I was in my 20s then, and most of your money gets spent on when you've been spent like a few weeks on a ship. Most of your money gets spent on the drink or night out when you get back. You know? I kind of wish I'd put some of that to one side, really, to be honest with you. But you know, it is what it is. You enjoy yourself when you can.
No, exactly. You're only young once, aren't you? And you live and you learn. So,
exactly.
So we met during your Scott Logic days. How did you, I guess, get into like the consultancy side and finance side? Was there anything else, anywhere that you worked prior to that was in a similar?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. It's a bit unconventional. So, I guess I worked for RSL and Flow, and then I went to work for SMD. I got made redundant from SMD pretty much when the bottom fell out of the telecoms market. It was a turbulent time for a lot of people. From SMD, I went to a company called Luxy, who used to make CCTV equipment. But they didn't just write the software; they actually manufactured the processors that did motion JPEG in the back of the cameras and stuff like that. And that was a really cool company, really small company, but we're doing really innovative stuff. And then I moved on from there and started my own software house, selling back into companies like Luxy and others, because it was really early days for lots of companies who did physical engineering, like building CCTV products or manufacturing offshore stuff. They were doing good work, but from a software person looking in, I kind of felt like actually having a dedicated engineering department who knew the sort of nuances of writing software, providing services to those types of firms was probably better. Almost like the consultancy model a lot of people use now. So I started my own company then. When I say my own company, it was me and my brother was selling. My brother had been a car salesman, and he said, "I'll come and help you." So he was selling consultancy as well as being a car salesman at the time. And I did that for about 7.5 years. Never got really big. I think at peak, I employed about 6 people, something like that. Bit of a niche consultancy. And we picked up a client who had an office in Athens, but actually the CEO actually just lived on the road. Actually, we're in Middlesbrough at the moment, so just lived on in Thornaby there. Okay. They found us out the Yellow Pages, and they said, "We want you to build a thing." And it was essentially the reason why they didn't want to go to a big company, they wanted to come to a small business, was they wanted to build like an automated trading system for foreign exchange trading. I had no clue what that even was at the time. I knew what foreign exchange was, obviously, but I didn't know anything about it. And they said the reason why I want a small company to do it locally was because actually there's lots of proprietary information there in terms of actually you implementing these algorithms. So therefore, they don't want to share them on big corporate documentation. So we sat doing that, and we did that for about 2.5, 3 years. I'm trying to think when this was, but I had to wrap that business up in 2010. And I think we had a few clients who we didn't get paid off. It was during the banking financial crisis after the whole Lehman Brothers thing in 2008. And at the time, the CEO guy called Paul basically said, "Look, you're struggling. If you ever decide to wrap the business up, why don't you come and work for me?" So at that time, I went into the company was called C Capital. I started at C Capital as their CTO. Tosh, who was my business partner, who did more of the physical, looking after laptops and supporting servers and networking and all that sort of stuff. He kept that his part of that business going. And I moved on, and I was at C Capital for about 4.5 years, and that was my first foray really into investment banking. But that was pretty cool. They had a nice place out in Greece, and so I could go and work near Athens every now and then. And stuff. It was quite a nice place to be. And they were a great bunch of people, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I did that for about 4.5 years, and that was how I got into finances.
Yeah, and then from there, that's when you moved on Scott Logic.
Oh, Scott Logic, yes. Yeah. So Scott Logic, I was there about 4.5 years, and then I think I wanted something local where I could go into an office full of people, and also I wasn't being part of an engineering team enough. C Capital was really small company. I wanted a bigger team, I suppose. So I got talking to Scott Logic, and I think at the time I did a first round of interviews, and it was a technical interview. You know Scott Logic had a bit of a reputation for being a tough one, and I did terrible in it. I saw my feedback afterwards, a few years later when I went and looked it up. I did terrible in it, but I think there was a particular person there who saw something. So I had another round, and then I had another round. I think by the time I got an offer, I think I'd had 5 or 6 rounds. And I was thinking to myself, if I don't get the job at this point, then I'm probably going to put a bill in for a day's work. But no, they offered me a job as a lead developer there, and I started as a lead, and I worked with some great people. And actually, I have to say I was there for about 8 years, probably. No disrespect to anybody else, but it's one of the best companies I've worked at. Really good culture, really good group of people. Nobody being carried. Everybody knew exactly what they were doing, like really top-notch engineers. Yeah. I learned so much there. I went from being I'd never really worked for a big team before, and I've got no qualifications officially in software engineering. I haven't done a computer science course or anything. Purely self-taught. And I think the first few months were like, I know nothing. Like I literally learned myself that I thought I knew something and I knew nothing.
Yeah.
But working with some really great minds, like really good problem solvers, really good software engineers, people who knew the theory really well. Like they'd talk about these software terms. I'd be, I don't know what that means. I've got no comp sci degree. You're going to have to explain that to me. And I knew what it was. I just didn't know what you called it. Yeah. So yeah, I learned so much there. It was a great company, and made some really good friends who are still colleagues who I speak to regularly still now. Yeah.
So like you start there, then was that quite tough? Did you feel any sort of imposter syndrome, or did
Yeah, absolutely big style.
And what sort of steps did you think you took that then helped you? Because I'm sure that there'll be a lot of developers that join a new company and they'll go in there and they'll see like there's already established team there that they're all really clever people, all doing really good stuff, and they may feel like it's a bit daunting. Like, was there anything that you maybe could share from your journey that helped you then obviously carry on being the success you were there? Maybe, was there like a period where you had to either upskill yourself or take any steps to get ahead?
Lots to unpack there, but I guess imposter syndrome, yes. I don't like calling imposter syndrome because I think I deserve to be there. Yeah. I just deserve to be there in a different way to a lot of other people, and I think that's a good thing. I think everybody that you hire should be different to everybody else because you don't want an army of clones, right? But I felt massively out of my depth in the first few months, and I guess the first project I was on there basically didn't go so well for me. It was all right. I did an all right job, but it didn't go so well. And I think the key thing I learned there was listen. I'm a talker, right? You've known me long enough now. I talk a lot, but actually to listen and try and take in what other people are doing and really sort of embrace the team around you. I think it's so important. And I'm glad I did that. And then also, I guess, make sure you're doing the right thing. Make sure you understand the brief. Make sure you understand what the thing that you're actually going to do. So there were times where I'd jump into something and I'd go, right, we've been asked to do this. That means this, and this. And it actually didn't. And I got it so wrong where everything I did would be good, but it wasn't the right thing. And I think that's where you stand out. You mentioned imposter syndrome, about feeling like sort of out your depth. That's been my whole career. I think if you don't feel that in a career, you're not pushing yourself. Because if you're pushing yourself, you're always going to feel out your depth. Yeah. I think I'm 48 now. I'm not getting on. I'm not going to say I'm getting on because they're all. But I've been doing this for a lot of years now, and I think it was only maybe 4 or 5 years ago that you get to a point where you think, oh yeah, I actually do know some stuff. Like you realize I know some stuff, and I have faith in myself, and what's the words in Love Island? My wife watches Love Island all the time. I back myself. You have to back yourself, right? So I think you reach a point where you know things, but until then, you should always be out of your depth. Because if you're not pushing yourself. And so I felt like the whole time I was at Scott Logic, every new project was, I'm probably out my depth here. I'm probably out my depth here. I was never open about that. But and trust yourself to do the right thing, you know. Yeah. And actually, trust yourself, but also trust the people who've put you in that situation, because I suppose there's a lot of people around you who wouldn't put you in that situation if they didn't think you were capable. I like to think that I've essentially passed that on. There's a few people who I've worked with. I'm not going to call them out on a podcast or anything, but there's a few people who I've worked with who have said to me, "I'm not sure I could do that," and you can, and deliberately put them in those situations. So, and it's worked out great. And they went, "I didn't know I could do that." I'm like, "I told you you could." So, like, I'm still there now. I've still got people telling me I can do things. You should do that more. And I'm starting to listen more. So listen, top tip.
Yeah. Okay, no, amazing. No, sounds good. It's great that you're so open about that as well, because it was more a case of, I think there will be developers on that journey at the moment, whether they join a new company or if they're in consultancy, they've got projects coming on. So naturally they will maybe feel like that. Because I guess in consultancy especially, you have to be a little bit more dynamic, because you're almost like a bit agnostic when it comes to tech and looking at what the best solution is for that particular client. So you've worked for like a couple of consultancies, so you've worked for Scott Logic, you've worked for BGSS, so you'll have seen a lot of different projects, a lot of different requirements. So how did you find that, maybe compared to when you've worked for maybe either internally for a company or working on like one particular product compared to working in consultancy?
Good question. I'm not going to compare consultancies, because actually all consultancies I've worked for have been good consultancies. They've been different, but they've been good. I think, first of all, in consultancy, you're never going to join a good project. I've come up with that. People say there are good projects out there. I've yet to find one. I've been doing this for a long time. Because actually, if something is all hunky-dory and working well, they don't need a consultancy. So everything that you touch is either going to be broken or nobody with the client knows how to do it. It's a greenfield thing where they need that skill set that they don't have, and you need to bring that skill set and convince them of the right thing to do. Or it's just a mess. It's just chaos, and they need you to unpick that chaos and fix it. And then I guess the downside of consultancy is, once it's all unpicked and the world is nice, then you move on, so you don't even get the rewards. So in that respect, consultancy is terrible. But what it's great at is, it's great that every 6 months to 12 months to 2 years, you can take something new. You can move elsewhere with the same colleagues, the same culture and environment of that consultancy and everything else. And you get some of the best problems. And I'll say this now openly: they're never technical problems. Sometimes, generally not technical problems. They're always people, and it's not individuals. It's just wrong bums in wrong seats. And if you can reshuffle that, and sometimes the process gets in the way and move the process, you can fix that. So in a product company, you have similar challenges. Sometimes it's finding that happy medium. I think it depends on the size of the company. So I did some work. I'm not going to name company names either, unless I've worked there directly. But I guess I did some work in a large multinational commodities business, like hundreds of billions in terms of revenue, really large engineering department. And the programmer work there that can run for years and years and years and spend millions and millions and millions. And you do sit in the corner some days and you think, actually, if you just give me a team of 5 people, we could build this in a few months. But I think the thing that people forget there is, there's governance, there's red tape, they're regulated, there's all the bits and bobs. And while you could do that, you still then need to do all of the other stuff. So and again, this goes back to building the software is the easy bit, right? Designing the solution, that's the easy bit. Being able to sort of get that software from somebody's idea into a production environment, especially in regulated industry like finance, is very, very hard. And again, it's people and it's process regulation that gets in the way. Then you can look at small companies, and the problem is small companies, as they start to grow up. So I can talk about Titan Bay. Titan Bay, a very small company, VC funded, doing really well, great company. Still, no, not there. Still a great company, and just trying to actually find that happy balance between over-regulation heavy process, but also still regulated to get that pace that you need for VC. They're completely different worlds. Both worlds are great.
Yeah.
I don't mind. I think the consultancy, product company, they're not the choices. I think the choice is working on a cool project.
Yeah.
Working on something that's genuinely interesting. Either hard technical challenge or something new and innovative.
Yeah.
Or something that's going to make people's lives better as well.
Yeah. I mean, that was literally going to be my next question, but I think you summed it up nicely there. You know, I was going to say, what would you maybe look for if you were, you know, looking into a company, if you were to join a company? But I think you have summed it up.
Well, I think Titan Bay is an interesting one because Titan Bay is actually, it's private equity, right? So it's ultra high net worth, and you kind of ask yourself, well, how can you sit and talk about that as doing the right thing? But I guess the goal of Titan Bay was to automate a lot of the process, therefore bringing the check size down. So it's that democratization, right? It's making that sort of world that more accessible to other people. And that's one example, right? There's lots of other examples of that. So sometimes working in finance, you have to look at yourself and go, how can I justify this work over this other piece of work? How does that impact people from an ethical, moral point of view, and other bits and bobs? So the way I do that is I'll tend to look at things and go, am I democratizing this? Am I making this more accessible to people?
Right.
Is this benefiting the masses, or will in some point in the future benefit the masses? And that's how I try to justify myself. And that's the sort of thing I'm looking for.
Cool. Great.
Unfortunately, the projects that bring that to the table are never. There's never enough funding for those sorts of projects, and it's just the world we live in, right? Like things that fix social mobility, education, all of that sort of stuff. There's never enough money there. And this sounds really terrible, but there's never enough money there to motivate the best people to go there.
Yeah.
If they're motivated by money.
Yeah.
But then again, some people have to be motivated by money. So like, you have to be able to pay your bills, and you want the best for your family.
Yeah.
And it's probably a bit of a deep political conversation. I've done all right for myself, right? But there's still a lifestyle to maintain. I don't feel like I live, I guess, a flamboyant, extreme lifestyle. I'm not out there splashing the cash or anything. But I'm still. It's how can you contribute to those really interesting social projects without whilst being a bit selfish still. And I say that, whilst being a bit selfish, right? Yeah. Because why wouldn't I be? I want the best for my kids and other bits and bobs. Yeah. You know, it's really hard to make those decisions.
Yeah.
You have to do what's right for you at the end of the day.
No, absolutely. No, it's a hard balance. You're right. So, did you manage people in any of your roles or throughout your career?
Yeah, I did. So, I guess. So let's talk about Titan Bay actually. So Titan Bay, I looked after the engineering team. It was quite a small team. So when I started there, I think it was like 38 people. A lot of consultants actually. There was great 3 consultancies in there. And then our head of product moved us, or CPO, Chief Product Officer, moved on and inherited product for a bit. So I think at one point it was about 40, 50 people, something like that, about half of the company. Managed to whittle that down to 0 when I left Titan Bay. I was a department of 1, which was quite nice to actually get some work done.
Yeah.
And in Scott Logic, I used to help with the grad program. As you know, I used to be the hiring manager for a little bit, and we used to talk a lot. Yeah. And I had some direct reports, and I had some indirect reports as well. Yeah. And then BGSS was the same.
Did you kind of fall into it, or was it something you really wanted to do?
I always tried to avoid line managing people. I hate the term line management. I think line management is the stick. I was more a big fan of the carrot. Scott Logic had an interesting setup there. I'm not going to talk too much about the details because it's an internal thing, right? But you always had at least 2 routes to someone. You always had your line management route, which was how the company looked after you, made sure that you were performing. But then there was always a pastoral route as well, where basically you could go to somebody who, they could be more senior, they could be more junior than you, but they were or a peer, but they were there for your coaching, I suppose, mentor, coach. I prefer the word coach because we're never about showing people how to do a thing. It's always about like trying to help them get to a point where they understand how they solve the problem themselves. And there were quite a few people I used to coach. I was always quite involved in the coaching side of that. Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. I think I like the people. It's a consultancy skill. I think I like the people side probably more than the tech, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
However, I don't think I could ever be a full-time coach because I just like the tech as well. But both. So.
But we were speaking earlier, you mentor someone that we both know as well, and you've done a little bit of mentoring. So have you kept that going, obviously, till the present day?
Yeah. And there's a few people who I see regularly now. I don't see them as much for mentoring, but I do meet them for a beer and a coffee here or there, and who I see them as friends now. Like you know, it's, they were colleagues.
Yeah,
and then I was the coach, or they were mentees, or whatever you want to call them. Sounds like some sweet, doesn't it? Mentees. Mix them with Diet Coke. I still see them. For a beer or a coffee or whatever, and consider them friends now.
Yeah. So bringing it to, I guess, current day. So you do some fractional CTO work, and then what else? I guess What are you up to? Like,
it's interesting. Interesting. So. Yes, I left Titan Bay in June last year, and took a bit of time out. It'd been a stressful 4 years, if I'm honest. Titan Bay, a lot of change and deliverables, and working in a VC-funded scale-up is heavy, right? You got lots to achieve for your investors very, very quickly. And then before that, BGSS, I was there for a little bit and stuff, and that was part of a new office in the city, Newcastle, not Middlesbrough, but in Newcastle. So it'd been quite a heavy 4 years. And I had the opportunity to spend a bit of time over the summer, not doing anything. So my wife's a teaching assistant, so she works in the school, Danielle, and the kids were off. So the four of us had the time off and spent the whole summer. So we went to Barcelona and we went to Italy, and we travelled around Europe a bit. We did the Apennine Express, the Glacial Express, crossed up the Alps, and other bits and bobs in October. Yeah. So I took a lot of the year off and basically just tried to immerse myself back in the Northeast, because I think I neglected the Northeast a little bit when I was at Titan Bay. I was in London quite a lot because I was so focused on the role, I didn't do as much. I used to do quite a lot of tech talks and conferences and other bits and bobs and get out to events and meet people. And I didn't do as much of that over the last few years. So it was kind of almost like sort of reconnecting with the Northeast. Yeah. Had a few conversations with people and got a little bit pestered off Danielle, my wife, when are you going to get a job again? So I had a few conversations, and I decided actually that I wasn't going to. I'm getting a bit older, and I think I know what I want, really, and I wasn't going to jump into the wrong thing. So there were two full-time roles that I was in process for. Still in process for one of them. It's quite a long process, but I wasn't jumping in and applying for everything. I think I did look at the hiring market, and I posted on LinkedIn a few times. For anybody who follows me on LinkedIn a few times, I think tech recruitment's broken. It's so broken in the UK. I think I'm quite lucky enough to have a network of people that I can talk to, and that's the only thing that was working for me at the time to actually find what I did next. I think these days you fire an application off into this black hole where there's 1,000 other people applying for the role, and sometimes you don't even hear back. So I think we need to fix that as a community. We need to fix that. I don't know how we fix it. Don't know what the solution is. Probably involves AI. Everybody's talking about it. I rekindled some of the networks, got talking to a few people, and then they were like, "Oh, well, I've got this thing, or there's this client I'm dealing with, or there's this, that, and the other." But it was never a they can afford to hire you 5 days a week for the next 12 months or whatever. And I think a lot of companies are in that situation now. As sort of a head of engineering or a CTO in a small companies, probably a role that you don't need 100%. It's that strategic steer. It's due diligence around other bits and bobs. It's the regulatory piece. It's all of that sort of stuff. And if you're a smaller business, you don't need that. Yeah. Actually, if you're a larger business, sometimes you don't need that as well. So I think that's why it's becoming so popular. Yeah. There's obviously tax perks to being outside IR35 and working for yourself as a consultant with multiple different companies. Yeah. So that there's obviously tax perks there and other bits and bobs. But I think the main thing for me was I quite enjoyed the thought of going back to work 3 days a week. I love my kids and I love my wife, but the weekend's not a break for me. Unless we're away from the home. It's always either DIY or the kids are playing rugby or there's jobs to be done or there's shopping to be done, and everybody else is off, so it's really hard to get anywhere. So I actually quite enjoyed for a little bit working Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and on a Monday and a Friday taking my laptop, go and sit in a cafe near the beach, and working on little pet projects. So I started looking at a thing which actually spawned out of something we were working on at Scott Logic that never really went anywhere, which is I guess a framework for skills assessment for tech hiring and recruitment. Shameless plug, technical-catalyst.org is an open source project that I'm working on a few people with to try and develop a community, try and almost build a skills tree and see if we can figure out how we do skills assessment for technical people, but without conflating lots of things that we conflate. Like we always conflate seniority with experience, for example. Or we always like, what's a lead developer? Does it mean you're leading people? Well, actually, we've got some really senior developers who don't want to lead people, but they're really good developers. It's like trying to unpick all of that and think what works for the tech industry. So it's an open source project. If anybody wants to jump in, have a look. It's on GitHub, Technical Catalyst. It's early days. Don't judge. But we're trying to do that as part of the community. So I was quite passionate about that, and that was something I was doing my days off. And then, as you know, I'm a massive petrol head, so I'm building a social app for car enthusiasts. So we'll talk about that a little bit if you want. But it was my first foray into. I guess the motivation for it was learning a bit of Flutter and Dart. So I've never really dabbled, so I like keep up to date with tech. Yeah.
So working as you are now, a bit more with a bit more flexibility, it's allowed you to then obviously, put things towards like your passion projects and I guess helping out businesses. I mean, I spoke to another fractional CTO on the podcast. So he's actually got his own company, but that's one of their services is being a fractional CTO. And, he's talking about, as you've mentioned, some companies, they can't afford a 6-figure CTO, especially at early stage and stuff. So they obviously there is a real need for that in the market of just expertise and frameworks and governance and stuff, or maybe even helping develop their mid-level, senior-level developers because there isn't the money there. So I think I agree. Like there is a real need for that, and there's a lot of fractional. You can get like fractional recruitment business partners now. So again, companies might not have the funding to hire like a full internal team, but then they can make use of contract and recruiter. I mean, there's a couple of things we've talked about even before the chat. We've talked about the contract market, we'll talk about AI, but we can talk about your passion project. I think that's really good because you demoed it to me earlier and it looked really, really good. So by being a bit flexible, you've got, you've had some days. I think are you working full time now at the moment, 5 days?
I am, yeah. I just talking a little bit about that. I guess I'm a fractional head of engineering with Synergy Bank at the moment, which used to be the Bank of Cyprus, but it's I guess the UK operations is now Synergy Bank. Yeah. And actually, that was a mutual other tech leader who's now there, who was looking for someone to help him out. And that's how that started, and that was 3 days a week. And then it's a bit full on at the moment. We're trying to get a new product over the line, so it's 5 days a week at the moment. To the point where actually even recording this podcast, I'm gonna have to pop out for the afternoon. I'm sorry, guys. It's a bit full on. It's not for a elongated piece of time, but also it's through another mutual company that we do a lot with. It's through we know Sarah at Hedgehog Lab, so I'm working with Hedgehog Lab on a few things at the moment in Newcastle. They've just helped the hub in Leeds and other bits and bobs. So I'm working with them a little bit at the moment, trying to do some bits and bobs here and there.
I think what you said earlier was interesting as well about like building your network and I work in recruitment, so I understand what you mean about how the market has been a bit unstable. Where a lot of companies maybe aren't hiring as much or advertising, or even when they are advertising, whether LinkedIn or things have made it so easy to apply where there's just so many applications going. Sometimes you just maybe even put off a plan where you see a vacancy and it says 100 plus people have already applied for it, and like you said, it gets lost in an abyss. So would you say building that network? I mean, obviously by the sounds of it, that's how you've got these opportunities by speaking to people. So even if somebody's mid-level senior, I mean, I know we know a few mutual people who are doing that, and I had a conversation with them a couple of days ago, and they said that that's where they've got a lot of their results was like just meeting people for coffees, going to events. So would you say that that would be like a bit of a win, how you can maybe get ahead of the pack at the moment?
It is. I also I'm a great believer that's how we should do business. I think we've lost a lot. We've lost a lot just in like, it might be just because I'm older, right? But we've lost a lot in social interactions. Like when I ran my business years ago, it was 2005, 2006, somewhere around then. Basically, the only way I could win business and the only way I could hire people was actually going out to events and meeting people and getting to know people, understanding them and everything else. Yeah. And I think in this pointy, clicky online world, we've lost a lot of that. And I think we need to bring some of that back. Go right back to when I was a kid, the best way to get a job was if your dad knew someone in that job. That people used to joke about it. And it's not quite the same. It's not like if your dad knows someone, because I came from a background where my mum and dad worked really hard, but we were definitely like a working class family, and we didn't know people who could get us into those positions. But I think building that network of people is definitely the way forward. Because people deal with people, right? You can click whatever you want, you can get whatever application you want, but no matter what job you get, caveats, edge cases, but most of those jobs, the biggest problem is going to be dealing with other people. And we said this before, right? In a consultancy role, when you go into business, you've never really got a technology problem to fix. Sometimes you have, but it's normally a well-trodden path. There's not many companies that are reinventing everything from scratch. Yeah, they mostly solve problems. I guess the biggest challenges are always human interaction. How do you organise a large group of people to achieve a goal, and having those skills to get the job in the first place and meet people and grow your network and speak to people and have those conversations about what you're looking for and being open up front as well. There's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn right now about people talking about salaries and stuff where they go through a whole process and then they get lowballed, or they don't make it clear what they're after before they start the process, and then they think they've been lowballed but they haven't because they just didn't ask at the start. Like, have a conversation. Like, I think it's about being human, right? It's about conversations, just generally. So yeah, absolutely, building your network is if you're not building networks, if you're not getting introduced to people and going to events and meeting people, you're going to struggle right now. You're going to struggle because we've had a complete flip from just before COVID, where it was basically people were demanding ridiculous salaries because companies couldn't get the right people because there was a shortage. We're on the opposite side of the spectrum now, and it's definitely an employer's market right now. There's some great people on the market, and it's a really big pool of people. Like, there was a job went up the other day. I got a notification of on LinkedIn. I think it was a head of engineering for wasn't even London. I think it was like a Leeds-based firm, and it went up, and it's still in the application. This went up 2 hours ago, and it had over 100 applications. And actually, you don't know whether they're genuine as well. Like, AI is not helping. AI is helping, but it's not helping. Don't use AI to write your CV. Write a proper CV. Email it to someone. LinkedIn. Don't do fast apply or easy apply. Find out who's hosting the role. Get in touch with them. Have a conversation. If they won't pick up the phone, then basically just ping them a message, drop them an email saying, I've got a few questions about the role. Can we have a conversation before I apply? It's always a good way of actually getting the conversation, because then you get your foot in the door then. You've got a chance to have a conversation up front.
Great. No, I think that's a really good tip. And I agree with everything you're saying there.
I feel sorry for people like yourself.
Yeah,
feeling all those calls.
I don't want to, wallow in my own self-pity, but it's been tough. So tell me a little bit about your passion projects. So you demoed it to me earlier, so it was quite interesting. So I've always
been a massive petrol head. I don't know the right words. Petrol head these days, maybe electric head these days. Because I've always been a massive petrol head. I've always had daft cars, hot hatches when I was younger, and I've had a Toyota Supra which has been sitting in my garage and been tinkered with for the last 8-9 years, and other bits and bobs. I've always liked fast cars. It's always been my passion, and I've been involved in motorsport, rallying, and a bit of track circuit racing and stuff. But one thing I used to go to and I used to love was, I don't know if you're old enough, the max power days back in the day, where people would buy a course and pull the big body kits and everything, and everyone, it's horrible what you done that for, but somebody would love it. And I don't think we're there anymore, but I think in this new world where it's really easy to get finance on a really good car, like you can go get a BMW 140i or something like that on finance now, there's lots of them knocking about. Then basically everybody and his dog are rocking up in some sort of supermarket car park, and then being moved on by the police because they're all being a bit silly, let's say. So it was how can we bring back those good old days? where people used to meet up, where they were allowed to meet up, where they won't cause any bother, and they could walk around and appreciate a nice car and appreciate the work that's gone into a car, and then use them responsibly, like at a track or somewhere like that on private land or whatever, where they're not bothering people.
Yeah.
I do think there's a flip side to this, by the way, that I'm going to think about how to be polite about this. That actually, if we move, kids have a hobby, right? They have a hobby which is looking after their car. 2 or 3 of them meet up in a car park. They're not doing any harm. They're not revving their engine. They're not lighting their tires up or anything like that. But they still get moved on because they're not supposed to be in the car park. If we keep moving them on, where do they go? What do we expect? And it was the same. It was the same with antisocial behaviour and stuff. In when we killed all the youth clubs, got rid of all the youth clubs. Right, got loads of youth clubs. Somewhere to go. Got rid of them. They're not happening anymore. No funding. Right, but actually, kids sit on the street corners. What we're going to do with them? Move them on. Where are they going to go? Unless they go home. So there are places where people can go with their car. There's car cafes and all sorts of bits and bobs where they'll welcome sensible people who are going to be sensible and not mess about. I'm going to be a bit controversial. So a lot of antisocial behaviour, and I think Section 59 notices are handed out now for people with cars. Is it more antisocial to socially meet with your friends and be sensible, or to complain about somebody who's meeting with their friends and being sensible? I would say the person who's being antisocial is the person who's complaining about them doing nothing. It's a bit of a controversial statement, but I think what we wanted to do was create a community of car enthusiasts which incentivizes good behaviour, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've got an app that we're building, and it's you like a lot of apps, you put your car in there and you can add your modifications, and it connects the DVLA, so it'll tell you where it's taxed and so on, MOT, so it sends you reminders and stuff. But more than that, it's got a couple of modes, so you can see I'm out and about in my car. You press a button before you go, and then when you stop, you press the button to stop. No interactions. It's integrated with CarPlay and Android Auto as well, so you get some stuff on the screen. And when you're out and about, anybody else who said they're out and about in the car, it'll show you where they are. And what we can also do is we can geofence areas and say we've gamified it. So you when you're cruising, or when you add a car, or when you do things that promote good community practice, like you go to an event or you organise an event or those things, you gain, we call them kudos, but you gain points essentially. And when you do things that are not good for the community, you lose kudos. So what that allows us to do is it allows us to actually ring fence certain geographical areas. So this is a problem area of the car park where people keep meeting and they've got no permission to be there and that sort of thing. We can ring fence that, and if you go there, you lose kudos. Likewise, if we've got a car cafe, it's got an event on, and they can ring, they can say, there's an event on here. When you go there, you gain kudos. So we've gamified it to try and create the sort of like the self-policing sort of responsible car organisation. So it was an idea. It seems like a reasonable idea. We've shared it with a few car groups now, and there's a bit of interest around it. We're trying to work with the roads policing and the council as well, to try and sort of see what their problems are, because anything like this has got to have buy-in from those people otherwise. But I guess the technical challenge will be quite interesting as well. So we're a team of 2, and I suppose when you've got to actually have the option to pick any vehicle model, make, manufacturer in the country, and when you pick that vehicle, we need a picture of it and all the other bits and bobs. That's hard. That's a lot of work to do for 2 people, over and above actually adding features. So we've deployed a lot. I'm going to say it. Sorry, we've deployed a lot of AI. So we've got Midjourney, for example. Oh, actually, it's DALL-E now, but it was Midjourney, generating pictures of all of the cars. So the first time someone adds a car in this, we generate a stylized picture for the app until you upload your own picture. We're using AI to parse public data that's in the public domain to actually figure out all the makes manufacturers. So this is like information that's published by the government. So and I'm learning learning and slowly starting to love Flutter as well, Dart, which I've done a little bit with, but never really with any real sort of vengeance. And
do you think like working on a project like this has really helped you pick up that skill?
It's made me think I want to sit in a car cafe and mess with cars and do this as a full-time job. So what I really need to do is earn some money from it, and then I can do that. So that's what's made me think. I think as a consultant in fractional roles, it's even harder to try and keep yourself up to speed. You have to be proactive about going to conferences and events and and also just reading blogs and watch what other people are doing and being up to date with stuff, because you're no good as a fractional engineer or CTO if you can't talk about these things and at least be aware of what's happening in that world.
Yeah.
And what you lose from being part of a big consultancy is that common opinion, that sort of shared opinion of a big group of people.
Yeah.
One thing you get from a big consultant, which is great, is you walk in and someone will be talking about something new tomorrow or something new. And it sort of like it tips you off to go, I'll go and look at that. I'll go and look at that.
Yeah.
I think you really struggle. You really struggle when you're in the fractional role working for yourself to actually keep up to speed with that. And it's quite hard. So things like doing a pet project with lots of new tech that you hear about is probably...
No, it sounds amazing. I think it's great that you've... it's like a real passion of yours. I can sense that when you speak about it as well, that it's all coming out in terms of, like having a passion project. And obviously now being in a position that, you've obviously had time to work on it. Maybe not at the moment, because I know you're working full time.
but no time at the moment.
You've had the flexibility to do that. I know we spoke a lot about flexibility as well. So in terms of AI, I know we had a little bit of a chat about it earlier. You're obviously using it in your product. Almost every software tool that I'm using now for my business has some element of AI with it as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that it can affect jobs for junior, mid-level developers, or do you think that then there could be? Yeah, I mean, just in general, what are your thoughts on AI?
I mean, will it affect jobs? Yes. Will it detrimentally affect jobs? I hope not. Can't say yes or no. I think what I would say is it's just another tool. I think this. And actually, AI as a term is nonsense. Like, before the term AI became a buzzword, we had 20 other phrases for things that we were doing anyway. Machine learning, large language models, all that sort of thing. So you have to be quite specific. I guess the one that you're probably talking about is generative AI, because that seems to be the topic of conversation now. Can a computer, or a bunch of computers, can compute generate the output of a human in their role? Excuse me. I was on a paddle for another podcast. I'm not going to talk about it because it's another podcast. But the other day with a few people who are, a few of them know a lot more about AI than I do, and we were talking a little bit about two things. First of all, the first thing is AI should be deployed to everybody. We have to be sensitive about data, but I think the critical thing is that at the end of the day, AI is the tool. It's not making the final decision. As long as we can keep away from AI making that final decision, I think it's a great tool. It requires some common sense. My dad's probably never going to watch this, so I'm going to talk a little bit. It's a bit like my dad. So my dad used to have a T-shirt that said, "Don't ask Google, ask me." Because my dad, when he answers a question, sometimes he won't know the answer, but he tells you with such conviction and it's plausible that you kind of got to say, is he right? Is he wrong? I need to go and fact check that. And I think if you just treat AI like that, you'll be fine. I would never rely on AI to make a final decision. Not right now, anyway. I'm not saying that won't be like that in the future, but with hallucinations the way they are, you can never rely on it to make a final decision. You have to have some human common sense right now. Some people say, why don't we get rid of the hallucinations? But I think the hallucinations are part of it, because AI is a creative thing. So if you get rid of the hallucinations, you get rid of its creativity. And therefore it ceases to be creative, it ceases to be useful.
Yeah.
What I would say as well is, actually I'll come back to jobs because the specific question was about jobs, but before I do, I'm really, really annoyed a little bit that we're using AI to do all of the cool stuff. I think there's a meme going around for a while, and I kind of agree that actually if we were going to find things for AI to do, it should be like your bookkeeping, your accounts, doing the dishes, doing the washing, those sorts of things. That would be the things I'd look for it to do, not making a painting. That we should be doing that as humans. It should be freeing up our time so we as humans can do the things we enjoy, like the creative things, like the truly creative things like painting, photography, those sorts of things. So I think using generative AI for all of the fun stuff and actually have us do the mundane stuff, it feels like the wrong way around. In terms of roles, I think we'll see roles being made redundant. We absolutely will see roles, not people, but roles. But actually, you said this, and it's a good analogy. Years ago, we didn't have social media. And basically we said, oh no, we've got social media. So all of these, like people who do print and stuff like that, like print marketing, newspapers, those sorts of things, those roles, a lot of those got made redundant. But those people got roles in media which never existed. And I think the same is to be said with AI, right? We will see roles being made redundant, but we'll see new roles being created, and we don't know what those are yet.
Yeah.
Maybe fact checkers, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing on LinkedIn where it's one of the most popular job titles now, AI engineer, and I know you were talking about Chow, yeah.
Yeah, chief AI officer. That's how we spell it. It's the wrong way around, isn't it?
Yeah, but yeah. I knew what you meant.
Chief AI officer is a thing now, apparently. Yeah, I could probably be a fractional Chow.
Yeah.
I don't know. What is that? It would be interesting to understand what that role is, because I think AI is a tool for everyone. It should never be a silo in a business. You shouldn't have like an AI department. You should have everybody has access to AI with some governance and some policies around it. Like AI should accelerate every department. Yeah. So it feels a bit weird. It feels like if AI was a thing in an organization to report to somebody, it probably shouldn't be a CAIO. It should be a CTO or a CEO or the CEO or just everybody. Like what? It's a horizontal role and a vertical, isn't it? It's like. It's a tool set. Makes no sense to me. Unless you're in the AI business, but then if it's the AI business, then literally it's your CTO or your CEO or your CAIO, because you're in the AI business. It doesn't make that much sense to me, if I'm honest. I think it's a marketing thing. Yeah. It's got to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to quickly just get your thoughts on tech tests. So I think people obviously can use AI for tech tests now as well, but... What do you think has worked well for you? Or, because obviously every individual is different. Some people like pair programming. Some people like to take away a test and do it in their own time. Some prefer technical conversation. Yeah. What do you think works best for you? Or what do you, and also...
As a hiring manager?
Yeah, as a hiring manager, yeah.
So, I'm not a big fan of tech tests, full stop. I'm not a big fan of long-winded process either. I'm not a big fan of asking people to do work to get a job. I think if you're a hiring manager, you should be able to sit in a room, virtual room or a physical room, with a person for an hour, and through a conversation and either working through a problem, not a technical test, because actually this is interesting. It depends on what the role is, but in most of the roles that I've hired for, which would be either consultancy or product focused or engineering focused, but to solve a problem, then solving the problem and how you work through the problem is way more important than the tech skills. You can teach a really smart person how to do tech, or they can learn how to do tech. You can't learn how to be smart. You can't learn how to... Smart's probably a horrible word. You can't learn how to... You can't...
It's like the inquisitive piece, isn't it?
Exactly. That's exactly. And like I said before, like 10% of any problem you come across in consultancy is going to be the technical problem. 90% of it's going to be the right bum on the right seat. So actually, what I really want is I'd rather have a mediocre engineer in a really high functioning team who can get along than have a 10x developer who can't get along with anybody. So in terms of specifically technical tests, I don't believe in them. Two-stage process, at least 4 people, for an hour. And if you can't hire someone on the back of that, then you probably shouldn't be hiring them. Yeah.
Is there any particular skill, like soft skills, you look out for? Any sort of, not red flags, but any time you see like a developer, if they maybe do something in an interview, or maybe you feel like they could have done better?
I want people to speak up. I'm looking for someone who is not frightened of going against the grain, not frightened of challenging on an idea. That's what I want. Because if what you don't want is a room full of yes people and clones. You never achieve anything from that. You always have to settle on one idea, and I've always said that actually compromise is the worst idea. You might have 4 good ideas in a room, but if you compromise, you've got 4 ideas rolled into one, and that compromise is probably a terrible idea. So actually, the ability to be able to have an open adult grown-up conversation about the 4 ideas and pick one is a really hard thing to do. Yeah. And so if someone has that ability to have that open conversation and I guess healthy conflict, have that conversation about, I think that's a terrible idea because let's not do that. And have that debate in an adult way. That's the sort of skills you want in a room when you're solving problems. So absolutely happy to speak up. However, it's everything in moderation. There's a balance, right? What you don't want is the person who gets their way all of the time or wants their way all of the time. They have to be willing to compromise. And I say compromise, I don't mean compromise. I guess, what's the word?
Because maybe willing to listen to other ideas and
accept other people's ideas. Concede is the word I'm thinking. Willing to concede that their idea isn't the best idea in the room.
Yeah. No, it's important, I think, because conflict can be useful. Obviously, it can be difficult as well within organisations.
It's got to be healthy
but a lot
conflict.
of people, a lot of leaders I spoke to, I've asked them about conflict. They've said, I think almost all of them said that it is important, and that's where some of the best ideas can generate from as well.
The thing with healthy conflict's an interesting one because it depends on the mindset you go into that conflict with. If you go into that conflict with the mindset of I'm annoyed or I'm angry, that's the wrong mindset. If you're annoyed, you need to step away and come back to it. It's an interesting one. Like, we're only at work. I said this to you before outside. Like, it was something on a different discussion. But you're only at work because you're being paid. Like, you might love your job, and that's fine. You might really get along with the people you work with, and that's fine. But you're only there because somebody's paying you to be there. If they weren't paying you to be there, you wouldn't be there. You'd be doing something else, right? If you could earn money without going to work, you'd use that money to live, right? And you'd go and do whatever you want. You'd go hill walking, you'd go out with your family, you'd do whatever you want. So I guess if you can get your head in that mindset of this is just a job. Yes, I'm going to do the very, very best I can at this job because I have some professional pride, I suppose. Then you can actually go into a conversation where it's never personal because it's just about the right thing for that thing you're trying to decide. And if you can get yourself in that mindset of this, no matter what we disagree on, this is never personal. Yeah. Then actually you can have some really, really open conversations where there is conflict in the room, but it's healthy.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I was just thinking about a football analogy sometimes when you play football, you say like you leave it all in the pitch and then that's it. And then once you leave the pitch, it's all like sort of forgotten about. Probably similar like that in work where you leave it all in the meeting or the meeting room, and then you just you can't let it affect you. Take it home with you.
You can never bear a grudge. Never bear a grudge. But I think bearing a grudge comes from when it becomes personal, and it should never become personal either. I think if you're in a room and it becomes personal, that's not healthy conflict. And there's no place for that in any workplace, really. Yeah. But it's about mindset. It's that people say never go to sleep on an argument. You've heard that phrase, right? Yeah. So it's you stew about it. Yeah. And if you start stewing, then you're not in the right mindset to have that conversation. You need to walk away for a bit and come back to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What does the future hold for Mark? What do you want to be doing?
That's a really good question. What would I like to be doing, and what do you think? What do I think is actually reasonable? What I'd like to be doing is I'd like to be working as few days as possible and doing the things I enjoy. I guess if I had a pipe dream, it would be sitting in a physical tuners cafe with the crew, working on the cruise app with a really good car community in a nice collection of cars parked outside. That would be, but I think that's a bit of a dream. I'm quite enjoying the fractional piece. I'm quite enjoying being a bit flexible about the days I work and the hours I work. I'm getting older. My kids, I've got 2 boys, 11 and 8, going on 9. And I think actually being flexible around them at this time, because I've only got probably, 10 years left before they want to do their own thing with their mates, and Dad's just the bank, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. So I'd like to be flexible at least for the next few years. However, I think Danielle, my wife, would like me back out to work 5 days a week, driving her over the wall. Yeah. So I'm looking at I've got a couple irons in the fires around long-term permanent roles. Not many though. I'm deliberately being very selective. I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now, to be honest with you. I'm enjoying work. I'm really enjoying working at Synergy, to be honest with you. I'm enjoying talking to Hedgehog about some of the things that they've got coming. Yeah. I'm just enjoying what I'm doing right now, if I'm honest. I'm in quite a good place at the moment.
So I guess you're glad you ended up in this industry.
Yeah, sometimes I'm a great believer in everything. It's funny as a scientist to say that actually I believe a little bit in fate. Because as a scientist I shouldn't. But I kind of... I'm a great believer in everything happens for a reason, right? And it's a good outlook on life, I think. If you look at life as everything happens for a reason, and I had a good few years of being really stressed. And the break I took at the end of last year has done it's given me the space to think about what I want to do and where I am in my life and other bits and bobs. And it's really important to take that break sometimes. So if you're in a position to take that break, obviously financially, then you can, through any means, take a break from work for a little bit. It's a really cool. It's a really good thing to do. It does wonders for you. You come back revitalised and a bit refreshed, and with a clear picture of what you want to do. You know. So I really, I've had a good 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, brilliant. Mark, it's been great having you in. Thank you for making the trip down, and it's been great speaking to you. Thank you.
It's good to speak again. It's been a long time. Pleasure.